Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're just joining us, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more romantic comedies, and let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? We'd love to hear from you, and stick around until the end for a special rating. Now let's dive into Maya's story. The Greyhound bus pulled into the Port Authority at 6:47 in the morning, and Maya Sterling pressed her forehead against the window like a child at an aquarium, watching the city she had memorized in every detail through glossy magazines and late-night internet scrolling. New York was everything she had imagined and nothing like she expected. The air tasted different, metallic, alive, thick with possibility and exhaust fumes in equal measure. The skyscrapers didn't just tower above her, they seemed to lean in, curious about this girl with the Montana dust still clinging to her boots and the borrowed Samsonite suitcase that had belonged to her grandmother. Maya was 24 years old, 5 feet 6 inches tall, with dark hair that refused to cooperate with humidity and eyes that her mother called determined brown, a phrase that meant stubborn in the way only mothers could make compliments sound like gentle warnings. She wore a navy pantsuit she had found at a thrift store in Billings, pressed it 17 times the night before her departure, and it still looked like it belonged to someone else. But that was the point, wasn't it? She was supposed to become someone else. She was supposed to become a New Yorker. The dream had started small, in her bedroom in Dry Creek, Montana, a town so small that the entire population could fit inside a movie theater and still have empty seats. It started with an article in a business magazine she found at the public library, featuring a man named James Hartwell, the 32-year-old CEO of Zenith Industries, a technology company that was revolutionizing cloud computing and artificial intelligence. The photograph showed him in a charcoal suit, standing in front of floor-to-ceiling windows, with Manhattan sprawling behind him like a kingdom he owned. He had sharp cheekbones, dark blonde hair swept back with the kind of careless precision that probably took 45 minutes, and eyes that seemed to look directly at whoever was reading the article, at Maya specifically. Or so she had believed. She had read that article 43 times. She had researched James Hartwell's entire career. His degree from Princeton, his first startup at 26, his TED Talk that had 12 million views, his reputation for being brilliant, demanding and entirely unmoved by conventional wisdom. He was the kind of person who appeared on magazine covers and changed industries. He was the kind of person who mattered, and Maya, who had grown up in a house where the most exciting thing that happened was when the Johnsons' barn caught fire, had decided that if she could work for someone like that, maybe she could become someone like that. Maybe New York would transform her into the version of herself that had always been waiting to exist. The Zenith Industries building was located in Midtown, a glass and steel monument to itself on Park Avenue. Maya had walked past it 3 times before she had the courage to go inside. The lobby smelled like expensive leather, and coffee so refined it seemed to have opinions. There was a waterfall, an actual waterfall inside, made of black marble and lit from beneath with cool blue lights. She had stood there for 2 minutes, just breathing. The interview process had taken 6 weeks. She had answered questions about her technical knowledge, her communication skills, her ability to work under pressure. She had researched the company obsessively, learning its portfolio, its competitors, its strategic initiatives. She had practiced her answers in the bathroom mirror until her roommate, a girl named Sheila from Queens, had told her to either stop talking to yourself or start charging admission. Maya had been offered a position as an associate in the corporate strategy department, entry level, 12 other people on her team, 3 levels below the C-suite, but it was Zenith, it was New York. It was the beginning of everything. The night before her first day, she had called her mother. "I'm so proud of you, baby," her mother had said, and Maya could hear her crying softly on the other end of the line. "You're going to do amazing things." "I'm terrified," Maya had admitted. "Of course you are. That's how you know it matters. Her first day was perfect. She arrived 45 minutes early, which meant she was the first person in the office. She walked to her cubicle, a small space in a sea of other small spaces, but her small space, and spent 20 minutes arranging her desk. She had brought a photograph of the mountains outside Dry Creek, a plant she hoped wouldn't die, and a small notebook where she planned to write down everything she learned. Her manager, a woman named Patricia, with kind eyes and tired shoulders, had taken her around and introduced her to the team. Everyone had been nice, genuinely nice. People had asked her where she was from, and when she said Montana, they had asked interesting questions. What part? What was it like? Do you miss it? She had felt seen, recognized, welcomed into something larger than herself. The office was everything she had imagined, 28 stories of open-plan workspaces with glass walls and collaborative areas. People walked around with laptops, talking passionately about algorithms and user experience and market disruption. The energy was electric. The energy was purpose. At lunch, she ate a salad at her desk and watched the other employees move through the office, learning their rhythms, their hierarchies, their unspoken rules. She noticed which people had corner offices, which people stopped to talk to, which people commanded attention simply by existing. At 4:47 in the afternoon, an email came through. Strategy team meeting, conference room B, 5 p.m. She had checked her reflection in her phone camera 3 times before heading to the conference room. Her makeup was still intact. Her hair had only moderately rebelled. She could do this. The conference room was intimidating in the way that expensive things often were. All glass and minimalism, and a table that probably cost more than her car. Patricia was already there, along with the other team members and 2 people from the executive level whose names Maya had written down. Michael Chen, the VP of Strategy, and someone who would only be identified as James on the email. But Maya knew who he was. She knew exactly who he was. He stood at the head of the table with his back to the room, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. He was taller in person than he appeared in photographs, with shoulders that seemed to carry the weight of the company itself. When he turned around, his eyes were colder than they looked in magazines. "Sit," he said, and it wasn't cruel, but it also wasn't kind. It was an instruction, like what you'd give to a dog you didn't particularly like, but tolerated, because it was useful. Everyone sat. The meeting was about a new product launch strategy. Patricia presented first, walking through market analysis, competitive positioning, and projected outcomes. She was nervous. Maya could see the slight tremor in her hands as she clicked through slides, but her presentation was solid, well-researched, smart. James listened without expression. When she finished, he said nothing for a long moment. Then, "It's derivative. Everyone is doing this." "Where's the innovation? Where's the vision?" Patricia's face flushed. "We believed the conservative approach was safer given the current market." "I didn't hire you to be safe," James said. "I hired you to be exceptional. There's a difference." And then he looked at Maya. Not at Patricia, not at the other team members, at Maya. She felt her stomach drop, like she was falling off a cliff she hadn't known was there. "You're new," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Maya said, and her voice sounded very small in that large room. "I'm Maya Sterling. I started today." "Montana," he said, and she couldn't tell if he was asking or concluding. "Yes, how did you—" "Your accent," he said, and smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile that a cat might give a mouse before pouncing. It's charming, in an provincial way, like listening to someone describe a sunset they saw once, but didn't understand. The room went very quiet. "I grew up in Dry Creek," Maya heard herself saying, and she knew immediately it was a mistake. You don't correct people like James Hartwell. You apologize and disappear. "Dry Creek," he repeated as though the words were a joke he was appreciating. "Is that a real place, or did you invent it for atmosphere?" Someone in the room made a sound that might have been a laugh that they tried to turn into a cough. "It's a real place," Maya said, and her face was burning so intensely she wondered if the sprinkler system would activate. "We have a population of 217 people." 217, James said, walking closer. "And you thought the next logical step was a company with 3,000 employees in Manhattan. That's quite an ambitious leap." "I wanted to—" Maya started, but he held up a hand. "I'm going to be direct with you, Ms. Sterling, because directness is something we value here." He paused, and in that pause, Maya understood that directness was not something he valued. It was something he wielded like a weapon. "The strategy your team presented today is mediocre. Your team is mediocre because they lack the foundational understanding of innovation that separates exceptional companies from ordinary ones. And they lack that understanding partly because they're managed by people who come from cultures that don't encourage risk-taking." He looked at Patricia, then back at Maya. "You work for a company in a town of 200 people. I didn't," Maya said quietly. "I worked at a marketing firm in Billings before I moved here." "Billings," he said. In the same tone someone might say Chernobyl. "Even more my point. You've spent your entire professional life in environments where incremental improvement is considered success, where the most daring thing anyone does is try a new font in their PowerPoint presentation." He was walking around the table now, and every eye in the room followed him like a predator was circling. "What you need to understand, Ms. Sterling, is that New York, that Zenith, is not a place for people who think small. It's not a place for people who are impressed by their own reflections in modest ponds. It requires a different caliber of mind." Maya's hands were shaking. She folded them in her lap. "If you're going to work here," James continued, "you need to understand that everything you learned before this moment is probably wrong. Your instincts are probably wrong. Your sense of what's acceptable is definitely wrong. Everything about how you operate needs to be recalibrated, otherwise you're just going to hold other people back." He smiled that cold smile again. "I assume you understand that." Maya understood that she wanted to disappear. She understood that she had made a terrible mistake coming here. She understood that the version of herself she had hoped to become was never going to exist in this building, in this city, around this man. "Yes," she said, "I understand." "Good," James said. "Patricia, I want you to completely reimagine this strategy. You have until Monday." He looked at his watch, not because he needed to know the time, but because the gesture was designed to communicate that he had somewhere more important to be. "We're done here." Everyone filed out of the conference room in silence. In the elevator, nobody looked at Maya. Patricia patted her shoulder once, but it was a gesture born of pity, not kindness. When Maya got back to her cubicle, she sat down and didn't move for 2 hours. She watched people leave. She watched the office grow quiet. She watched the sun set over Manhattan, turning the sky into something that looked like a warning. At 8 o'clock, she called in sick the next day, then the next week. Then she resigned via email on a Friday night, addressing it to Patricia instead of James, because she couldn't bear the thought of him reading her resignation letter. She imagined him smiling at it, pitying her, confirming everything he had said about people from places like Dry Creek. She flew back to Montana on the red-eye, and she didn't tell anyone why. She just said the city wasn't for her. She just said she realized she wanted something different. But late at night, alone in her childhood bedroom, she cried the kind of tears that felt like they came from somewhere deeper than sadness. They came from the place where hope goes to die. The next 10 years happened in a way that was almost accidental, like her life had a trajectory she wasn't consciously steering. She went back to the marketing firm in Billings, but this time with something different in her eyes. The humiliation had burned something away. The naive optimism, the belief that she needed external validation to be worthy. She started working harder than she had ever worked. She stayed late, came in early, and when she had an idea, she pursued it relentlessly. Within 2 years, she was running the entire marketing department. Within 4 years, she had started her own consulting firm with 2 partners, David and Priya, people she had learned to trust because they had stood beside her through failures and celebrated successes without trying to diminish them. Sterling Holdings grew quietly. They worked with tech startups, retail companies, real estate developers, businesses that understood innovation but didn't have the sophistication to articulate it. Maya became known for her ability to see what companies were trying to become and then help them tell that story to the world. She never talked about New York. When people asked about her time there, she said it was a learning experience and changed the subject. But she thought about James Hartwell sometimes, not in the way people think about people they love, but in the way you think about a scar on your skin, a reminder that some impacts leave marks that don't fully fade. She saw his name occasionally in business news. Zenith was still thriving, but he had become less visible. There were rumors about his management style, articles about high turnover rates, suggestions that the industry was evolving faster than he could adapt. He was still successful, absurdly, brilliantly successful, but there was something aging about his prominence, like he was becoming a relic of an earlier era of corporate leadership. And then, 5 years ago, Sterling Holdings had made its first major acquisition, a struggling tech company with incredible potential but terrible management. Within 3 years, it was thriving. They made another acquisition, and another. They built a portfolio, hired brilliant people, created a culture that was the opposite of everything Maya had experienced at Zenith. It was collaborative instead of hierarchical. It was encouraging instead of diminishing. It was, in a very real sense, the company she had dreamed of working for, except that she had built it herself. When Sterling Holdings announced its acquisition of a 20% stake in Zenith Industries 3 months ago, nobody had flagged it as significant to her. It was simply a good investment. A company that was undervalued, had incredible assets, and needed the right kind of leadership to realize its potential. It was only when the board of directors voted to give Maya an official position, president of Zenith Industries, with authority over strategic direction and organizational structure, that she had looked up James Hartwell's current title, CEO. He was still there, still in power, still presiding over the building with the waterfall and the windows, and he had no idea that the girl he had humiliated in that conference room was about to walk back through those doors, except this time she would be the one in charge. The morning of her first day as president of Zenith Industries, Maya stood in front of her hotel mirror and practiced her breathing. In through the nose for 4 counts, hold for 4, out through the mouth for 4. It was something her therapist, Dr. Patricia Chen, not Patricia from work, a different Patricia entirely, had taught her for moments when anxiety threatened to take the wheel. And this moment definitely qualified as the kind of moment where anxiety wanted to take not just the wheel, but the entire steering column and the car itself. She was wearing a charcoal grey Armani suit, not borrowed, not found at a thrift store, but purchased from a boutique in downtown Billings by a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. The suit cost more than her first month's rent in New York had been. It fit perfectly. It looked expensive. It looked like power. Her hair had been professionally styled at 6 in the morning by a woman named Svetlana, who had barely spoken English, but communicated through eyebrow movements that she understood the assignment. Her makeup was subtle but present. A red lip that said, "I am serious," without saying, "I am trying too hard." She looked like a president. She felt like she was going to throw up. The car service picked her up at 7:45. The driver, a man named Marcus, who had worked for Sterling Holdings for 3 years and therefore knew to keep quiet, drove her through the early morning Manhattan traffic. The city looked different now than it had 10 years ago. Or maybe she was different. Probably both. The Zenith building was still there, still imposing, still making her feel like a small person looking up at something incomprehensibly large. Except now, She was the one making the decisions about what happened inside it. The lobby had been updated. The waterfall was gone, replaced with a sculpture of twisted metal that was probably supposed to represent innovation, but mostly looked like a car accident. The aesthetic was cleaner, colder, less human than she remembered. She didn't allow herself to hesitate. She walked directly to the executive elevators, used the keycard that had been sent to her hotel that morning, and ascended to the 37th floor where the C-suite offices lived in their own special ecosystem. Her office was waiting for her, large, imposing, decorated by someone who had excellent taste and no personality. There was a window that looked out toward Central Park, a desk made of some kind of dark wood that probably had a story involving trees and Brazilian contractors, and absolutely nothing that said anything about who she was. She had 2 hours before the all-hands meeting where she would be introduced to the company. 2 hours to settle in, to breathe, to prepare for the moment when the door to the conference room would open and she would see him again. The conference room was the same one where her humiliation had taken place. Of course it was. The universe apparently had a sense of irony. There was a long table, now polished to a mirror shine, with chairs arranged for the executive team. Behind the table, there was a presentation screen where her biography and credentials were already displayed. Behind that screen was a set of windows that looked out over Manhattan, and beyond the windows was the sky, turning from dark blue to light blue as the sun climbed higher. The executives filed in slowly. She recognized some of them from research. Michael Chen was still the VP of strategy, now older, with gray threading through his hair and a softness around his middle that suggested the pressure of the job had found an outlet in his relationship with lunch. There was a CFO named Richard, a chief technology officer named Aisha, and various other titles and faces that meant nothing to her yet. And then there was James. He came in last, which made sense because he was still the CEO, still the person everyone else orbited around. He was talking on his phone, not looking at anyone, gesturing in a way that suggested whoever was on the other end was irritating him. He was older than she remembered, but it was a distinguished older. His hair had more silver in it. There were lines around his eyes. He had the look of someone who had been carved by years of making important decisions. He was still handsome. That was annoying. It would have been better if he had become unattractive. It would have been simpler. He hung up the phone as he sat down, and for the first time he looked at Maya. Their eyes met across the table, and she watched the recognition happen in real time. His eyes widened slightly, his jaw tightened, his entire body went very still. "Ms. Sterling," the chief HR officer, a woman named Dorothy, began, not noticing the seismic event happening silently across the table. "Welcome to Zenith. We're excited to have you here as our new president. Perhaps you'd like to say a few words." Maya stood. She did it slowly, deliberately, holding James's gaze for a moment longer than was comfortable. Then she turned to look at the rest of the room. "Thank you," she said, and her voice was steady. "I want to start by saying that I'm aware this is an unusual situation. Zenith has been a successful company for a long time, under strong leadership." She paused, letting that land. "And the goal of my position is not to dismantle what works, but to build on it, to evolve it, to ensure that Zenith doesn't just survive the next decade, but thrives in it." She walked slowly around the table. She had practiced this walk. She had practiced it in her hotel room for an hour. "I've spent the last 10 years building a company from nothing. Sterling Holdings is successful because we understand that people are not resources to be squeezed for maximum output. They are minds to be challenged, valued, and developed. They are human beings who do better work when they feel respected." She paused. She looked at James. "I intend to bring that philosophy here. It's my understanding that there have been some challenges with employee retention in recent years. We're going to address that. Not because I'm soft or naive about business, but because I'm realistic about the fact that talented people have options, and if we don't give them a reason to stay, they'll go somewhere else. That's quite a statement to make on day one, James said. His voice was calm, but there was an edge underneath it. I assume you've done extensive research on our employee challenges. I have, Maya said, and she sat back down. I've also reviewed quarterly reports for the last 5 years. Zenith's innovation rate is down 17% compared to 5 years ago. Market share in our core products is stagnating. You're profitable, which is impressive, but you're not growing the way venture capital companies are. You're not taking risks. We're cautious, James said. There's a difference. There is, Maya agreed. Caution keeps you safe, but it also keeps you small. The room was absolutely silent now. I think we should probably get started on the more formal presentations, Dorothy said, with the tone of someone who had never been less comfortable in her entire life. We have a full agenda for... I'd like to speak with Ms. Sterling privately, James said, standing up, before we continue, if that's acceptable. It absolutely was not acceptable. They had an entire day of presentations scheduled, but nobody in that room was going to argue with James Hartwell, including Maya. Of course, she said. They walked to his office without speaking. It was on the 38th floor, a full level above hers, which made sense because hierarchies apparently still mattered at Zenith. The office was massive. Corner windows on 2 sides, a desk that was even more impressive than hers, bookshelves filled with first editions and business books and things that were probably meant to communicate intelligence and taste. It communicated something anyway. He closed the door behind them. "You're Maya Sterling," he said. It wasn't a question. "I am," she said. "The Maya Sterling from 10 years ago." "That's right." He walked to his window and looked out at the city. "I didn't recognize you immediately. You've changed. People do, over the course of a decade. Not like this," he said. He turned back to face her. "You were terrified. You were out of your depth. You looked like someone who had wandered into the wrong building." "I was," Maya said. "I did. You made sure of that." He flinched slightly as though she had hit him. "That meeting," he said. "I remember that meeting. I'm sure you do. It's probably one of your favorite memories, the day you made an associate cry so hard she resigned by email." "I didn't make you cry," he said, and there was something almost defensive in his tone. "I was honest with you." "You were cruel," Maya said quietly, "and you knew you were being cruel. You enjoyed it. I watched you enjoy it." He was silent for a long moment. Then, "Why didn't you tell anyone about your history here? When Sterling Holdings announced the acquisition, why didn't you mention that you had worked at Zenith?" "Because it was irrelevant," Maya said. "This acquisition is about the numbers, the market position, the potential. It's not about settling scores or revenge or whatever you probably think this is." "Is it not?" he asked. "No," she said. "Though I won't pretend that standing here now in this position isn't satisfying. I won't pretend that I didn't think about this moment, what I would say to you if I ever saw you again. What I would say to the person who tried so hard to convince me that I was too small, too provincial, too unsophisticated to belong in his world." She walked closer to him. "But I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because Zenith is a valuable company that's being run into the ground by someone who stopped innovating 5 years ago and started just managing instead. And I'm going to fix that, with or without your cooperation." "You can't fire me," he said. "I have a contract that runs for another 3 years, with a severance package that would make your head spin." "I don't want to fire you," Maya said. "I want you to prove me wrong. I want you to show me that the person who sat at the head of that table 10 years ago was actually worth the space he took up. Or I want you to prove that you were always exactly as hollow as you seemed." "And what if I can't do either?" he asked. "Then you'll leave when your contract is up, and you'll spend the rest of your life telling people you used to matter." She could see something shift in his face. Anger, probably. Frustration. The realization that he was no longer in control of this particular dynamic. "I'm going to ask you something," he said, "and I want you to be honest with me. Okay, Maya said. Did you buy Zenith because you wanted to help it, or did you buy it to prove something to me? Maya considered lying. She considered claiming that she had never thought about him, never thought about the company, never thought about any of this. She considered walking out of the office and refusing to engage with the question. Instead, she told him the truth. Honestly, she said, I don't know, probably both. When David and Priya presented the acquisition opportunity, the first thing I did was look up who still worked here. And when I saw your name, I felt something I haven't let myself feel in 10 years. Rage. Real, clean rage. The kind that burns everything away and leaves you standing in the ashes, wondering what you're supposed to do now. She paused. But then I did the actual analysis. I looked at the fundamentals. I looked at what the company could be. And I realized that regardless of who was running it, Zenith was worth saving. So yes, I wanted to come back here and prove something to you. But I wanted to do it the right way. I wanted to do it by actually being better. He was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. It wasn't anger, it wasn't shame, though there was something of that underneath it. It was something closer to recognition. The moment when someone sees clearly the consequences of their actions. I've thought about that meeting, he said quietly. Not often, but occasionally. Usually when I couldn't sleep. I've thought about the fact that you left, and I've wondered if I was responsible for that. You were. I know, he said. I know now. At the time, I told myself that I was just being direct, honest, pushing you toward excellence. But the truth is, I was being a bully. I was insecure about my position. There were people circling, people who wanted my job, people I worried were smarter than I was, and I pushed down anyone I perceived as a threat, including a 24-year-old on her first day of work. He ran a hand through his hair. That doesn't excuse it, but it's the truth. Maya didn't say anything. She had spent 10 years imagining this conversation, and in her imagination, it usually involved her being very composed and him being very sorry, but not in a way that felt entirely genuine. This felt different. This felt like he was actually admitting something, rather than performing remorse. I don't expect forgiveness, he continued. I don't expect to become your friend, or for this to be anything other than difficult, but I want you to know that I recognize what I did, and I've spent the last decade trying to be better than that person. Have you? Maya asked. Because I've reviewed your employee reviews, and the pattern of people leaving after a year or two hasn't changed much. I know, he said. I know, and I don't know how to fix it. Every time I try to be supportive, it feels false. Every time I try to encourage people, it sounds like criticism in my own ears. I'm not sure I actually know how to be the kind of leader that people want to work for. He said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity, which made it more powerful somehow. It was the kind of admission that cost something. Well, Maya said, you're about to find out, because I'm going to be watching your every move, and I'm going to be training you in what employee-centered leadership actually looks like. Is that a threat? He asked. It's a promise, she said. The all-hands meeting happened at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the company auditorium. There were 437 people who worked at Zenith Industries. Maya had learned this from the employee roster, 437 people who had been affected by working in an environment where the CEO ruled through fear and criticism rather than inspiration and support. She stood on the stage with James beside her, and she could feel the confusion radiating from the audience. The CEO and the new president standing together. What did this mean? Was James being replaced? Was this some kind of power play? She let them sit in the confusion for exactly 30 seconds before she spoke. I want to talk to you about the story we tell ourselves about what it takes to be successful, she said. Some of you have probably been told that excellence requires cruelty, that greatness demands sacrifice, that the people who care about you can't be the people who push you, and I'm here to tell you that's a lie. She could see James watching her, his expression unreadable. I'm here to tell you that it's possible to have a company that is brutally competitive in the marketplace, but deeply supportive internally. It's possible to demand excellence while still treating people with respect. It's possible to build something that matters without destroying the people who build it. She paused, letting that sink in. They've spent 10 years building Sterling Holdings into a company that proves this is true. And I'm now asking James Hartwell, the CEO of Zenith Industries, to work with me to transform this place into something similar. Not to destroy what's been built here, but to evolve it, to make it a place where talented people want to stay, where they want to build their careers, where they feel valued. She looked at James. He was looking back at her, and she saw something in his expression that she hadn't expected. Something that looked like hope, or maybe relief, or maybe just the recognition that he was finally going to have the chance to be someone different than he had been. This isn't going to be easy, Maya continued. Change rarely is. But I believe that the people in this room are capable of extraordinary things. I believe that Zenith has an incredible future if we're willing to build it together with generosity and honesty and real respect for each other. She smiled, and it was a real smile, not the corporate smile she had practiced in the mirror. Welcome to the next chapter, for all of us. The applause started slowly, then built. People stood. 437 people stood, and they applauded. In the wings, she could see Dorothy wiping tears from her eyes. Later, at the end of the day, after all the meetings and introductions and difficult conversations about strategic direction, Maya was packing up her office when James appeared in her doorway. "How did you know what to say?" he asked. "At that all-hands meeting, how did you know exactly what they needed to hear?" "I didn't," she said. "I said what I needed to hear 10 years ago. I said what I wish someone had said to me when I was drowning." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know I said that in my office, but I want to say it again, in case it matters. I'm sorry for what I did to you. I'm sorry for the cruelty. I'm sorry for the fact that my words made you feel like you didn't belong somewhere you absolutely belonged." Maya looked at him for a long moment. "I know," she said finally, "and I'm going to need you to prove it through your actions, not just your words. But yes, I believe you're sorry. People don't usually get sorry right. They usually overcomplicate it with explanations and excuses, but you just said it straight, and I think you meant it." "I did," he said. "Okay," Maya said. "Then that's a start." The first week at Zenith was a masterclass in controlled chaos. Maya started her mornings at 6 o'clock by reviewing financials, employee records, and strategic plans. She took the subway, much to the horror of Dorothy from HR, who tried repeatedly to arrange a car service, because she wanted to understand how the other half of Zenith's employees got to work. She wanted to see what their commute looked like, where their attention went, what the morning looked like for people who didn't make 6 figures. It was illuminating. It was also depressing. She watched people scroll through their phones with the dead-eyed expression of people going to a job they tolerated rather than loved. She watched them get off at Park Avenue with their shoulders already tense, already bracing for impact. By the time she arrived at Zenith's offices, she had her strategy mapped out. The first thing she did was schedule one-on-one meetings with every executive. The second thing she did was request access to internal surveys, the anonymous feedback that employees had been giving to HR for years. The third thing she did was implement a new open-door policy for herself. Any employee could request 30 minutes on her calendar, no questions asked, no intermediary required. By Wednesday, she had 47 requests. By Thursday, she had 112. The meetings were a cascade of similar stories, people who felt undervalued, people who were scared of making mistakes, people who had brilliant ideas but were afraid to voice them in meetings because they worried about being shot down. There was an engineer named Marcus who had invented a workflow optimization system that could have saved the company $200,000 a year, but he never presented it because he had watched James humiliate someone else for suggesting something less radical. There was a product manager named Sophie who had left and come back 3 times because she couldn't decide if she wanted to stay. She had just signed a new contract, but her voice when she talked about her decision was hollow. She sounded like someone who had given up on happiness and settled for a paycheck. These conversations were painting a picture of a company that was slowly strangling itself from the inside. And then there was James. He was trying. She had to give him that. She could see him actually trying. In meetings, he would start to say something critical. Then he would stop himself. She could see the physical effort it took him, the way his jaw would tighten, the way his hands would press into the table. It was like watching someone trying to change a fundamental part of themselves in real time. It was both admirable and deeply uncomfortable to watch. They had a standing meeting every Friday afternoon to discuss strategy, priorities, and the direction of the company. These meetings were supposed to be professional. They were supposed to be strictly about business, except they kept turning into something else. On the first Friday, they were discussing the product roadmap when Maya mentioned that one of the engineers had suggested a completely new approach to the software architecture. It was ambitious, would require significant retooling, and had about a 60% chance of actually working. "Who suggested it?" James asked. "Marcus Chen. He's been here for 4 years. He's brilliant, but he's cautious about speaking up." "Because of me," James said flatly. "Partly," Maya said, "but also because the culture here rewards certainty over innovation. Nobody wants to fail publicly. So we're stuck," James said. "We can't move forward without risk, but we've created an environment where people are terrified of risk." "We can change that," Maya said. "It won't happen overnight, but we can change it." "How?" he asked. "By making failure a component of success rather than a component of humiliation," she said. "By celebrating the things people learned from falling on their faces. By creating a space where brave ideas are protected even if they don't work out." He was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite pass. It was something like admiration, but mixed with something else, something that looked almost like longing. "You've thought a lot about this," he said. "I've had 10 years to think about it," she said. "And I've spent 5 of those years actually implementing these ideas. So yes, I've thought about it. I want to learn," he said quietly. "I want to actually understand how to lead the way you do, how to make people feel capable instead of terrified." It was such an honest statement that Maya found herself caught off guard. She had prepared for many versions of James Hartwell. She had prepared for defensive James, angry James, James who tried to maintain his position of power, but she hadn't quite prepared for the version of him that was genuinely asking for help. "Okay," she said, "then we'll work on it, but it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to require you to acknowledge patterns you've been running for a long time. It's going to require you to actually change your behavior, not just your intentions." "I know," he said, "but I want to try." By the middle of the second week, Maya had settled into a routine. She arrived at the office at 6:30 in the morning, worked through her emails and strategic planning until 8, then took a walk around the building. She wanted to see people as they arrived, wanted to understand the rhythm of the office before it became official business. She wanted to catch people in unguarded moments when they were being themselves rather than performing their professional roles. It was during one of these walks, on a Tuesday morning at 7:54, that she ran into James in the coffee room. He was making coffee with the kind of focused intensity usually reserved for performing surgery. He had a French press, freshly ground beans, and what appeared to be a thermometer to check water temperature. "Good morning," Maya said, trying not to smile. He looked up, startled, as though she had caught him doing something illicit. "I can't do the stuff from the coffee machine," he said defensively. "It tastes like electrical fire. I bring my own supplies." "I wasn't judging," Maya said. She was absolutely judging, but in a fond way. "That's actually very thoughtful." "I brought extra beans," he said. in case you wanted some. They're from this place in Portland that roasts small batches. They have a really interesting flavor profile." He stopped. "I'm being pretentious, aren't I?" "Extremely," Maya agreed, "but also kind of endearing." He poured the coffee into 2 mugs, ceramic, not paper, which suggested he had done this before, and handed her one. Their fingers brushed, which was probably accidental, but didn't feel accidental. "Thank you," she said. "For the coffee?" "For trying," she said. "For actually putting in the effort to change. I know it's hard. I know it goes against your instincts." "It does," he admitted. "Every time someone presents an idea in a meeting, my immediate impulse is to find all the ways it won't work. It's like my brain is hardwired to see problems instead of possibilities." "That's probably because you spent a lot of years being rewarded for exactly that," Maya said. "You got to where you are by being ruthlessly analytical, by seeing threats before opportunities. You probably developed that skill because it protected you somehow." He was quiet for a moment, looking at his coffee. "My father," he said slowly, "was a man who let people walk all over him. He was kind, he was gentle, he was a wonderful person, and people took advantage of him constantly. When he died, I was 23. I promised myself I would never be that version of vulnerable. I would be strong. I would be impenetrable. I would be the person who made the decisions, not the person who suffered them." He looked at Maya. "I think I overcompensated." "You think?" Maya said gently. "I know," he said. "I know that I created a version of myself that was strong in all the ways that don't matter and weak in all the ways that do. I built walls so high that nobody could reach me, which meant nobody wanted to try." "Is that why you're alone?" Maya asked, then immediately regretted it. That was too personal. That was crossing from professional into territory she had no business being in. But he answered anyway. "Partly," he said. "Partly it's because I'm difficult to love. Partly it's because I work too much and don't know how to turn it off. Partly it's because I've spent the last 10 years building a company instead of building a life." He smiled sadly. "And partly it's because I've spent 10 years wondering what happened to a girl from Montana who walked out of my office and never looked back, and whether I ruined her life or if she managed to thrive despite me." The coffee room felt very small suddenly. "I thrived despite you," Maya said carefully, "and I also thrived because of you. You made me so angry that I decided I would show you what I was capable of. I spent 10 years building something specifically, so I would never feel small again. So I owe you some gratitude for that, even if it doesn't feel like it should be gratitude." "I don't think you owe me anything," he said. "No," Maya said, "but I think maybe we're even now. We're starting from the same place, this moment, and we're both trying to figure out what happens next." "And what happens next?" he asked. Maya didn't answer immediately. She was very aware of how close they were standing. She was very aware of the fact that they had history that was painful and complicated and impossible to separate from whatever might happen between them now. "I don't know," she said finally, "but I think we should probably focus on the company first, on actually fixing the problems here, and then we can figure out what happens with us." "There's an us to figure out?" he asked, and there was something like hope in his voice. "Maybe," she said, "possibly. Ask me again in 3 months when I've actually fixed this company and we can both see if we're the people we think we are or if we're just performing versions of ourselves." The 3rd week brought a crisis that nobody had anticipated. An article appeared in a tech industry blog, not a major publication, but influential enough in tech circles that it mattered, detailing Zenith's problems. The anonymous source described a toxic leadership environment, consistent patterns of humiliation, and a culture of fear that had driven away some of the company's most talented people. The article mentioned James by name exactly twice, both times describing management decisions that had been publicly attributed to him as careless, damaging, and indicative of a larger pattern of poor judgment. It wasn't libelous, but it was close. It was factually accurate enough to sting, which meant it was impossible to dismiss as just haters hating. The board called an emergency meeting. Maya was in her office reviewing the article for the 5th time when James knocked on her door. He looked like he hadn't slept. He probably hadn't. "I saw it," he said without preamble. "I know," Maya said. "The board has called a meeting for this afternoon. They're going to want a statement. They're going to want a plan for managing the fallout." "Statements are true," James said. "Most of them, anyway. I did create a toxic environment. I did humiliate people. I did drive people away." "Yes," Maya said, "but we're not going to apologize for your past and ask for forgiveness. We're going to acknowledge that the company is changing, that leadership is changing, and that we're implementing structural reforms that will prevent this kind of environment from developing in the future." "How do we do that?" he asked. "By being specific," Maya said. "By saying that we're implementing mandatory leadership training. By saying that we're creating an ethics committee that includes people from multiple departments. By saying that employee feedback is now weighted as part of executive performance reviews. By showing that we're not just talking about change, we're building it into the infrastructure." She stood up and walked closer to him. "And by you being willing to be vulnerable. To say that you made mistakes and that you're working to correct them, not as a PR move, but as an actual part of the turnaround." "People will crucify me," he said. "If I admit to being the source of the toxicity, people will crucify me." "Some people will," Maya agreed. "But the people you actually care about, the people whose respect matters, they will respect you for having the integrity to acknowledge what you did and commit to doing better. And everyone else can think what they want." He was looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch slightly. "You believe in me," he said. It wasn't a question. "I believe in the person you're trying to become," she said carefully. "I'm not sure if that's the same thing, but I'm willing to bet on it." The board meeting took place in James's office, with the company's legal team, the board chair, a woman named Elizabeth, who had hired Maya specifically because she recognized that change was necessary, and several board members who looked deeply uncomfortable with the entire situation. Maya sat beside James, with the article open on her laptop. "We can't have him take public blame for this," one of the board members said immediately. "That opens us up to liability. There could be lawsuits." "There could be lawsuits anyway," Maya said calmly. "And frankly, the longer we pretend that there isn't a real problem here, the bigger that problem becomes. What we need to do is get ahead of this. We need to acknowledge what's true and demonstrate that we're committed to changing it." "You're asking him to put a target on his back," another board member said. "No," Maya said. "I'm asking him to demonstrate authentic leadership, which includes accountability." She looked at James. "Tell them what you want to say." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I want to say that I made serious mistakes in how I led this company. I want to acknowledge that my management style created a culture of fear rather than innovation. And I want to say that I've brought in new leadership specifically because I recognize that I can't fix this alone, and I don't want to try." "James," one of the lawyers started to protest. "I'm not going to spin this," he continued. "I'm not going to claim it was all a misunderstanding or that people just didn't understand what I was trying to do. I was cruel, and I was wrong, and I'm committed to being different." He looked at Elizabeth. "I'm also willing to accept whatever consequences the board sees fit. If that's a reduction in my authority, or a leave of absence, or termination, I'm willing to accept it, because I think Maya is right about what needs to happen here. And I think it needs to happen regardless of whether I'm the one at the helm." The room was very quiet. "I don't think we need to go that far," Elizabeth said finally. "But I do think we need a comprehensive plan for how we're going to restructure the company's leadership. And I think we need James to make that public statement, not as an apology for being accused, as a genuine acknowledgement of where things went wrong and where they're going right." "And if shareholders push back?" one of the board members asked. "Then they push back," Elizabeth said. "But I'd rather have a company that's honest about its problems and committed to fixing them than one that's defensive about its past. She looked at Maya. This was your plan all along, wasn't it? To come in here and force this company to face itself? Partly, Maya said, but mainly I just wanted to fix it. The forced reckoning is a side effect of actually caring about the people who work here. James's statement was published the following morning in a carefully crafted interview with the leading technology publication. He was honest. He was specific. He named patterns of behavior that he recognized in himself. He talked about the coaches he was working with, the therapy he had started, the structural changes he was implementing to prevent himself from falling back into old patterns. He also made a point of publicly acknowledging Maya's role in the turnaround, crediting her with helping him see the damage he had caused and giving him a framework for actually changing it. The response was complicated. Some shareholders wanted him removed. Some board members got nervous about the liability implications, but the employee response was overwhelming. More than 80% of the company's workforce, in an anonymous survey conducted that afternoon, said that they were willing to give the company a chance to improve under this new direction. And when Maya walked through the office on Thursday morning, people made eye contact with her. People smiled. People approached her with ideas instead of waiting to be asked for them. The culture was shifting. It was still fragile. It would take months, maybe years, to fully settle into something new, but it was shifting. At the end of the day, James knocked on her office door. "I wanted to say thank you," he said, "for not letting me hide, for pushing me to be better." "You did the work," Maya said. "I just pointed out that it was necessary." He smiled slightly. "There's a company dinner tomorrow night for the executive team and some of the key employees. I was wondering if you'd want to sit near me, so it doesn't look like we're on opposite sides of something." Maya hesitated. This was the moment where she was supposed to maintain professional boundaries. This was the moment where she was supposed to be careful about how things looked, about perception, about the fact that she was technically his boss. "Yes," she said, "I'll sit near you." His smile widened. "And after?" he asked carefully. "After the dinner, would you want to get coffee, just to talk? Not about work, about other things." "That seems like it could be complicated," Maya said. "Everything about this is complicated," he said. "But I think maybe that's okay." Maya picked up her coffee mug, the one from the French press, which she had started asking him to make her every morning. And she looked at this man who had once made her feel so small, and who was now trying to become someone who could handle her as a full-sized human being with a full-sized life and full-sized ambitions. "Okay," she said. "Coffee. After the dinner." The company dinner took place at a restaurant in Tribeca called Luminary, which was the kind of place where every element had clearly been considered by someone very expensive. The lighting was soft, but not dim. The tables were positioned to encourage conversation without being so close that anyone felt cramped. The wine list was probably longer than some novels. Maya arrived at 7 o'clock wearing a navy dress that she had bought specifically for this dinner. It wasn't too formal, nothing that said "I'm trying too hard," but it also wasn't casual. It said, "I have taste, and I respect this occasion." She had spent 45 minutes deciding between this dress and a black one, which probably said something about how much this dinner mattered to her, which was something she would prefer not to examine too closely. The executive team was already there, clustered around a large table at the center of the restaurant. James was standing near the bar, talking to Michael Chen from Strategy, but his eyes tracked to her the moment she walked in. He smiled. It was a small smile, but it contained something private, something that was just for her. This was dangerous. She knew this was dangerous. She had spent 10 years building a carefully constructed life where emotion was something that happened on her own terms, according to her own timeline. She had learned to be strategic about her feelings, measured in her responses, protective of the parts of herself that could be broken. And in the span of 3 weeks, James Hartwell had somehow convinced her to set those protections aside. "Maya!" Dorothy from HR called out, waving her toward the table. "Come sit with us!" She walked over, and James excused himself from his conversation with Michael and followed her. Of course he did. "I saved you a seat," he said, pulling out the chair next to his. "I hope that's not too presumptuous." "It's fine," Maya said, sitting down. "Professional and appropriate." "I'm genuinely trying to be professional," he said, leaning closer so that only she could hear. "I'm just not sure I'm succeeding." "You're doing better than I expected," she said. The dinner was pleasant. The company was good. There were people from different departments, different levels of seniority, and the mix of personalities meant that the conversation was genuinely interesting rather than just network-building small talk. James had clearly invited specific people who represented the new culture he wanted to build at Zenith. There was a young woman named Priya who worked in product development and had clearly been chosen because she was brilliant and direct. There was a man named David from the engineering team who had ideas that James had previously shut down but was now actually listening to. And sitting next to James, Maya watched him engage with these people in a way that was fundamentally different from how he had engaged with people 10 years ago. He asked questions, he listened to the answers, he didn't immediately start problem-solving or criticizing. He was creating space for other people's brilliance to exist. It was attractive, watching him do that, dangerously attractive. Halfway through dinner, after the main course had been cleared, and while people were deciding about dessert, James excused himself to take a call. He was back within 5 minutes, but Maya had noticed him step outside. She had also noticed that when he came back in, something had shifted in his face. "Everything okay?" she asked quietly. "My sister," he said. "She's had a baby. Surprised everyone by going into labor early. I'm going to need to leave after this to fly out to California tomorrow." "That's wonderful," Maya said. "Congratulations on being an uncle." "Will you still do coffee?" he asked. And there was something almost vulnerable in the question, like he was asking for far more than just coffee. "Before I leave? Tomorrow morning, maybe?" Maya knew she should say no. She knew this was the moment to maintain professional boundaries, to be sensible, to protect herself. She knew that James Hartwell represented a kind of risk that she had spent 10 years learning to avoid. "Yes," she said. "Tomorrow morning, 7 o'clock at that place near the office?" "Perfect," he said. The coffee shop near Zenith was called The Daily Grind, which was either charmingly ironic or deeply unoriginal, depending on your perspective. It was small, independently owned, and made coffee that was genuinely good, which Maya had learned because she had started coming here in the mornings after her walks through the office. James was already there when she arrived at 6:55, which meant he had probably been there since 6:30. He had ordered her a coffee, the same order she got every morning, which suggested he had been paying attention to her patterns. "You got here early," she said, sitting down across from him. "I couldn't sleep," he admitted. "I kept thinking about this morning, about what I wanted to say to you, about whether I was going to say it or just pretend this is a casual conversation between colleagues." "And what did you decide?" Maya asked. "I decided I've spent enough time pretending," he said, "that I've spent enough time being strategic about my feelings and careful about my words. I decided that if I'm going to ask you to take a risk on me, because that's what this is, isn't it? A risk? Then I need to actually be honest about what I'm asking for." He leaned forward. "I like you, Maya. I've liked you since you walked back into that boardroom 2 weeks ago. I've liked you in a way that is definitely going to complicate things, definitely going to make my job harder, and definitely goes against every professional instinct I have. But I can't pretend it's not happening." Maya wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "This is a terrible idea," she said. "Catastrophically terrible," he agreed. "You're technically my boss. We have painful history. We work in an environment where power dynamics matter enormously. If this went wrong, it could destabilize everything we're trying to build at the company. "So why are you saying this?" she asked. "Because I'm leaving in a few hours and I might not see you for 2 weeks, and I don't want to waste time being careful when I could be being honest. Because I want you to know that this isn't some strategic move on my part to protect my position or win you over. Because I'm 42 years old and I've never met another person who challenges me the way you do, who makes me want to be better, who sees me clearly and doesn't look away." He paused. "And because I think maybe you feel something too, and I don't want to spend 2 weeks wondering if I was right about that while you're here, wondering if you should have said something." Maya was very aware of the fact that her heart was beating very quickly. "I do feel something," she said carefully, "but feelings aren't the same as feasibility. Feelings aren't the same as wise decisions." "No," he said. "But they're the starting point, and I think we're past the point where we can ignore them and pretend they're not there." He reached across the table, but he didn't touch her. He just moved his hand close enough that she could have touched him if she wanted to. "I'm not asking you to make any decisions right now. I'm just asking you to acknowledge that this is real. That what's happening between us is real, and that when I come back from California, we're going to talk about what we want to do about it." Maya looked at his hand on the table. She looked at his face. She looked at this man who had once been her nemesis, and was now becoming something far more complicated and far more dangerous to her carefully constructed emotional safety. "Okay," she said. "When you come back, we talk about it." She reached out and touched his hand, just briefly, just enough to acknowledge what he was saying. He closed his eyes as though even that small touch was overwhelming. "2 weeks," he said. "I'll be gone 2 weeks, and I'll think about you every single day. You're going to have a new niece or nephew," Maya said gently. "You're going to have family and joy and the smell of a newborn baby. You won't think about me constantly. You don't know me very well if you think I won't multitask," he said, and she heard the smile in his voice. "I can both be present with my family and think about you. I contain multitudes." After James left, the office felt different. Not worse exactly, but shifted. The dynamic that had been building, the tension, the careful dance of professional boundaries with undercurrents of something else, suddenly had nowhere to go. Maya found herself walking past his office more often than was necessary. She found herself thinking about him at random moments throughout the day. She also found herself working harder than she had worked in months. She implemented the new leadership training program, bringing in an external consultant who specialized in toxic workplace cultures and how to transform them. She created the ethics committee, drawing from all levels of the organization. She worked with HR to redesign the performance review process to include 360-degree feedback, which meant that James's leadership would now be directly evaluated by the people he managed, not just by his peers. It was the right work. It was necessary work. But it was also work that she threw herself into with slightly more intensity than was strictly necessary, which probably meant something about how much she was thinking about James. By the end of the first week, the company was already shifting in noticeable ways. People were more willing to speak up in meetings. There were more ideas being generated. There was less fear and more possibility. The metrics that measured employee engagement had improved by 12% in just 7 days. It was objectively a success. And yet Maya found herself checking her phone constantly, waiting for messages from California that weren't coming. Not because James wasn't thinking of her. He had texted her on his second day with a photo of his newborn niece, a tiny creature with his nose and someone else's chin. But because he was clearly focused on being present with his family, which was exactly what he should be doing. On Friday night, after a long day of meetings and implementation planning, Maya went home to her hotel suite and ordered room service. She sat on the balcony overlooking Manhattan and tried very hard not to think about the fact that in just over a week, James would be back, and they were going to have to figure out what happened next. Her phone rang. It was her best friend from Montana, a woman named Cassidy, who she had known since high school and had kept in touch with through all the years and transformations. "Hey, stranger," Cassidy said when Maya answered. I haven't heard from you in like 2 weeks. What's going on? Did you implode at Zenith? Do you need me to drive up to New York and physically remove you?" "Everything's fine," Maya said. "Better than fine, actually. The company is transforming faster than I expected. People are engaged. The culture is shifting." "Okay, so work is great," Cassidy said. "But that's not the whole story. You have a weird tone in your voice. What's really going on?" Maya had always appreciated that about Cassidy, her ability to read Maya like she was a book written in very large print. "I might be having feelings for someone," Maya said slowly. "Oh my God," Cassidy said. "Tell me everything. Who is it? Is it someone from the office? Please tell me it's someone from the office, because that would be so messy and dramatic." "It's the CEO," Maya said. There was a very long silence. "The CEO of Zenith," Cassidy finally said. "Yes." "The man who humiliated you 10 years ago?" "Yes." "The man who told you that you didn't belong in New York?" "The same person, yes." "And you're having feelings for him?" "Complicated feelings," Maya corrected. "He's different now. He's actively trying to change. He's being vulnerable. He's asking for help. And I've been working with him to actually transform how he leads." "So you're helping him become a better person," Cassidy said. "And in the process, you're developing feelings for him." "I think so," Maya said. "That's dangerous," Cassidy said immediately. "That's like the most classic dangerous scenario. You're in a position of power. He was damaged before. You're healing him. That's like textbook complicated territory." "I know," Maya said. "But," Cassidy prompted. "But I also think there's something real there," Maya said. "Something that's not about fixing him or proving something. Something that's just actual attraction and respect and genuine connection." "Okay," Cassidy said. "So what are you going to do about it?" "I don't know," Maya admitted. "That's the problem. I've built this entire life around being careful, around protecting myself, and he's asking me to just take a risk." "Do you want to?" Cassidy asked. Maya looked out at the Manhattan skyline, at the lights, at the city that had once seemed so impossibly large, and now just seemed like the place where she was supposed to be. "Yes," she said. "I think I do." "Then maybe that's the answer," Cassidy said gently. "Maybe it's time to stop being so careful all the time. Maybe it's time to let yourself want something that's complicated and scary and potentially amazing." James texted her on Monday morning that he was back. Not "I'm back at the office" or "I'm back in New York." Just "I'm back." 3 words that meant so much more than 3 words should mean. They had agreed to meet for dinner at a restaurant called Ember, which was in a different neighborhood than the corporate restaurants Maya usually frequented. It was the kind of place where people went when they actually wanted to have a conversation rather than network. Dim lighting, quiet corners, excellent wine. Maya changed her outfit 4 times. She finally settled on a dress that was elegant, but not trying too hard, with a leather jacket that added an edge. She wanted to look like herself, capable, confident, but also someone who was willing to be vulnerable. James was already at the table when she arrived, and he stood when he saw her. There was something in his expression that made her breath catch, something raw and genuine and entirely unguarded. "Hi," he said simply. "Hi," she said back. They sat down, and there was that moment of awkwardness that happens when people who have been maintaining professional distance suddenly have permission to be closer. The server came and took their drink order. Small talk happened about the flight, about his sister, about what was happening at Zenith, and then James put down his menu. "I have to say something," he said, "before I lose my nerve." "Okay," Maya said. "These 2 weeks, I thought about you constantly. Not in a creepy way, or I hope not in a creepy way, but in the way you think about someone who has fundamentally shifted how you see the world. My sister asked me why I was smiling at the baby, and I realized I was smiling at the baby while thinking about you. That's how present you've become in my mind." He took a breath. "And I also thought about everything that makes this complicated. The power dynamics, the history, the professional implications, all of it. And I concluded that none of it matters as much as the fact that I don't want to go back to a version of my life where you're just my boss, where we're just colleagues. I want to try this. I want to actually date you and see what happens. That would require me stepping back from my role as your direct supervisor, Maya said. I know, he said. I've been thinking about how to solve that problem. What if I step down as CEO, not because of any pressure, but because I think this company needs someone fresher, someone less tainted by the old culture? What if you actually fully take over and I move into a different role? Chief Innovation Officer, maybe. Something where I'm still contributing, but I'm not in the position where I have decision-making power over you? That's a significant step, Maya said carefully. It is, he agreed. But I think it's the right one anyway. I think this company has evolved beyond what I can offer as a CEO, and I think you're the leader it actually needs. So it's not just a solution to our complication, it's the right thing for Zenith. The server appeared with their wine and took their order. When they were alone again, Maya said quietly, if you do this, if you step down, people are going to say it's because we're together. They're going to assume that this is romantic rather than professional. I know, he said, and I'm okay with that. I'm actually more than okay with it. I want to be with you. I want people to know that. I want to stop hiding. He reached across the table and took her hand. I'm not asking you for a forever commitment. I'm not asking you for certainty. I'm just asking you to take a chance on me, to see if this thing between us is as real as it feels like it could be. Maya looked at their hands on the table. She looked at this man who had once seemed so impossibly distant and unreachable, and who now seemed like the closest thing to true that she had found in a long time. Okay, she said. Yes, let's try this. He smiled, and it was the kind of smile that seemed to illuminate the entire restaurant. It was the kind of smile that made her understand why people wrote songs about falling in love. I have to tell you something, though, he said, about why I think this is the right time. What? She asked. My therapist, he said, who I've been seeing for about 5 years, way before you came back, suggested something about a year ago. She asked me if there was anyone in my past that I regretted treating poorly, anyone whose opinion I actually cared about, anyone who represented a version of myself I wanted to be different from, and I immediately thought of you. He squeezed her hand gently. I didn't know you were coming back. I didn't know that Zenith would be acquired. But there was part of me that wondered what would happen if I ever saw you again, if I would recognize the mistake I had made, if I would have the courage to actually apologize and try to do better. And now you do, Maya said. Now I do, he agreed. And I think that's not a coincidence. I think maybe the universe, or just plain luck, arranged for you to come back at exactly the moment when I had actually done enough work to deserve a second chance with you. They had dinner slowly, luxuriously, with wine and conversation, and the kind of easy connection that felt like it had been waiting to happen for 10 years. They talked about his family, about her ambitions for Zenith, about their dreams for what this company could become. They talked about the old hurt, acknowledged it, and let it settle into something that was understood rather than raw. When they left the restaurant, he walked her back to her hotel. At the entrance, he kissed her. It wasn't a tentative kiss or a questioning kiss. It was the kind of kiss that said, I've been thinking about this for 2 weeks, and I'm not going to hold back anymore. It was confident and tender, and exactly as complicated and wonderful as everything about their connection had been. Come upstairs, Maya said when they broke apart. Are you sure? He asked. Completely unsure, she said honestly, but I'm going anyway. Maya woke up at 6:37, which was earlier than her alarm was set for. The sun was coming through the hotel windows, painting everything in shades of gold. James was still asleep beside her, looking younger in sleep than he ever did awake. The lines of tension around his eyes softened. She watched him sleep for a few minutes, letting herself acknowledge the full scope of what had happened. They had crossed a line, multiple lines actually. They had moved from professional to personal, from adversarial to intimate, from "this is complicated" to "this is happening." He woke up gradually, becoming aware of her watching him with a smile. "Good morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Good morning," she said back. "No regrets?" he asked, and there was something vulnerable in the question. "Honestly," she said. "Too early to tell. Ask me in a few months when we've actually figured out how to do this in the context of working together and having power dynamics and all the practical complications." "Fair enough," he said. He propped himself up on his elbow. "I meant what I said about stepping down. I'm going to submit my resignation as CEO today. I'll send it to Elizabeth this morning." "Are you sure?" Maya asked. "That's a huge decision. Don't do it just because of me." "I'm not doing it just because of you," he said. "I'm doing it because it's the right decision for the company and the right decision for me. You just happen to be the reason I feel capable of making difficult decisions for the right reasons, instead of the wrong ones." He kissed her forehead. "And because I want to be able to date you without anyone being able to claim that you're playing favorites, or that my position of power is influencing our relationship, I want to do this thing with you from a place of actual equality." "Okay," Maya said, "then I support the decision. Even though it means my salary is going to be considerably lower," he asked with a slight smile. "Even though that means you'll have to make coffee at home instead of at a restaurant," Maya said. "Tragic, I know." He laughed, and she heard in that laugh the beginning of something new. Not just romance, but partnership. Not just attraction, but genuine affection and respect, and the willingness to do hard things for the other person. They stayed in bed until 8 o'clock. Then he left to go back to his apartment to get ready for work. The plan was for him to send his resignation to Elizabeth and make a formal announcement by end of business that day. By 9 o'clock, Maya was in her office when she received an email from Elizabeth. "Can we schedule a call?" The call came through at 9:45. "So James just sent me his resignation," Elizabeth said without preamble. "Effective immediately, he's stepping down as CEO and moving into a new role as Chief Innovation Officer. He says you're ready to take over full control of Zenith. Tell me he's not doing this because of personal reasons. He's doing it because he thinks it's right for the company," Maya said carefully. "And yes, there are personal reasons involved, but the professional reasons are solid." "What personal reasons?" Elizabeth asked. "He wants to be in a relationship with me," Maya said simply. And he thought that removing the power dynamic would be the cleanest way to manage that. There was a pause. "Is that going to be a problem?" Maya asked. "For the company, I mean." "No," Elizabeth said finally. "Actually, I think it shows remarkable judgment. He's putting the company's needs first. He's eliminating potential conflicts of interest. He's making himself accountable to you instead of the other way around. It's a sophisticated move from a governance perspective." "So we have your approval?" Maya asked. "You have my approval," Elizabeth said. "And I want you to know that the board is thrilled with the changes you've already made. Employee engagement is up, stock price is up, and there's genuine excitement in the company for the first time in years. Keep doing what you're doing." When Maya hung up the phone, she allowed herself a moment of relief. It would be complicated, it would be scrutinized, but it wasn't going to be stopped. The company-wide announcement that James was stepping down as CEO took place on Wednesday morning in the main auditorium. Elizabeth from the board made the formal statement, explaining that this was a planned transition that reflected James's desire to move into a more specialized role where he could focus on innovation and strategic development rather than day-to-day operations. Maya was announced as the new CEO effective immediately. The response was complicated. Some employees applauded immediately. Others seemed shocked, trying to process whether this was good news or a harbinger of something worse to come. The middle management seemed uncertain. This was a significant change, and significant changes made people nervous, even when those changes were ultimately positive. In the second row, Maya could see James watching her with an expression of pride and something else she couldn't quite name. Tenderness, maybe, or fear, possibly both. The announcement press release went out to tech media outlets. By lunch, there were articles speculating about what this meant for the company. Some were positive, new leadership signals, cultural shift at zenith, and some were more skeptical. CEO departure raises questions about stability. One particularly aggressive piece in a competing tech blog suggested that James's resignation was actually forced and that Maya was consolidating power. None of the articles mentioned their personal relationship. That was partly because nobody outside of the executive team knew about it yet, and partly because James had been careful not to make the connection obvious. But careful, as it turned out, was not careful enough. By Thursday afternoon, a blind item appeared on a tech industry gossip site. Overheard at a Zenith networking event. New CEO and recently stepped-down CEO spotted leaving a restaurant in Tribeca looking very cozy. Coincidence? Or indication that the power dynamic shift at Zenith is more personal than professional? It was vague enough to be deniable. It was also specific enough that anyone paying attention would understand exactly what it was saying. The first person to confront Maya about it was Patricia from HR, not the Patricia from 10 years ago, but the current head of human resources, a woman named Diane, who had been at Zenith for 3 years and had a reputation for being both sympathetic and rigorous about employment law. She showed up at Maya's office at 4 o'clock on Friday with a closed expression. "I need to ask you a direct question," Diane said, "and I need you to answer me honestly." "Okay," Maya said, gesturing for her to sit down. "Are you in a romantic relationship with James Hartwell?" There was no point in lying. Lying would just make this worse. "Yes," Maya said, "we are." "And when did this relationship begin?" Diane asked. "After I arrived at Zenith," Maya said. "About 3 weeks in, we had a conversation where he acknowledged his past behavior and apologized. We became closer over the following weeks as I was helping him work on his leadership skills. About 2 weeks ago, we acknowledged that there were feelings between us. He went to California to see his new niece, and when he came back, we decided to pursue a relationship." "And his stepping down as CEO," Diane said, "that was specifically to eliminate the power dynamic." "It was the right decision for the company anyway," Maya said carefully. "But yes, it was also partly to address the complication of our relationship." Diane was quiet for a moment. "I need to be honest with you," she said finally. "From an HR perspective, this is complicated but not necessarily problematic. You didn't hire him. You didn't cause his demotion. His stepping down was voluntary and was based on business rationale. There's no quid pro quo. There's no abuse of power. It's not ideal, but it's not legally or ethically problematic." "But," Maya prompted, hearing the unspoken reservation in her voice. "But people are going to talk," Diane said. "People are going to assume bad faith. They're going to wonder if you actually earned this promotion, or if you got it because you're sleeping with the former CEO. They're going to question whether your decisions are based on business merit or romantic preference. It doesn't matter if that's true. The perception is what matters." "So what do you suggest?" Maya asked. "I suggest you be very, very careful about how you handle this," Diane said. "I suggest that you make decisions that are clearly in the company's best interest, even when those decisions might be questioned. I suggest that you document everything. And I suggest that you consider whether this relationship is worth the complications it's going to create." After Diane left, Maya sat in her office for a long time, staring out the window at Manhattan. She called James. "Can you come up to my office?" she asked. "Now?" He appeared within 5 minutes. He looked worried. "What's wrong?" he asked. "We've been outed," she said. "Subtly, but outed. And Diane from HR came to tell me that people are going to question whether I earned this promotion or whether I got it because we're together." He sat down heavily. "I'm sorry," he said. I should have been more careful. I should have realized that it's not your fault, Maya said. We just weren't careful enough. Two people can't have dinner in Manhattan without someone noticing. And now we're in a situation where every decision I make is going to be scrutinized, and people are going to wonder if I'm making it because it's right for the company or because of you. What do you want to do? He asked. I don't know, Maya said honestly. I don't want to hide this. I also don't want to turn this company into gossip fodder about our relationship. And I really don't want to give people ammunition to claim that I don't deserve this job. Then we make it public, James said. We own it. We announce that we're in a relationship. We explain why I stepped down, because we were concerned about power dynamics. We show that we're capable of being professional about it, despite the personal connection. That's risky, Maya said. This entire situation is risky, he said, but I think the riskier move is to hide it and let people speculate. Speculation is worse than truth, because it gives people room to imagine the worst. They decided to make the announcement at the next all-hands meeting, which was scheduled for the following Monday. But first, they had to tell Elizabeth and the board. The board meeting took place on Sunday afternoon. Elizabeth, 3 board members, and the company lawyer sat around a table in a private conference room while James and Maya explained the situation. They detailed how the relationship had developed, they explained James's decision to step down, and they presented a plan for how they would manage the professional implications. This is unusual, one of the board members, a man named Robert, said. He was in his 60s and had the appearance of someone who had spent his entire career protecting shareholder interests. But I don't see anything here that constitutes a violation of policy or law. There's also something to be said for authenticity, another board member, a woman named Susan, added. Employees actually respect when leadership is transparent about these things. It shows that you're not trying to hide anything. My concern, the company lawyer said, whose name was Patricia Morrison, yet another Patricia, is that this opens you up to potential litigation. If anyone feels they've been passed over for promotion because of the relationship, they could claim discrimination. If anyone feels their decision to leave was influenced by the relationship, they could claim unfair working conditions. We understand the risks, Maya said, but we believe the transparency and authenticity outweigh those risks. Elizabeth was quiet through the entire discussion. Finally, she said, I think you're doing the right thing. The culture at this company was built on people hiding who they were, pretending to be less human than they actually were. You're signaling that that's no longer acceptable. I think that's powerful. I'm in favor of the announcement. The Monday all-hands meeting was packed. 437 employees in the auditorium, with another 200 watching via video from offices around the country. Maya could see the curiosity on their faces, the questions they were already forming about why they had been called to this special meeting. She walked on stage first, and then James followed her out. Just that visual, the two of them standing together, caused a murmur to run through the crowd. I'm going to make this brief, Maya said, because I think transparency is better than mystery, and I think you all deserve to know what's happening in your company. I'm here to tell you that James and I are in a romantic relationship. There was a sharp intake of breath from several people in the audience. I'm also here to tell you that James's decision to step down as CEO was specifically designed to address the power dynamic complications that such a relationship would create. He thought it was important to eliminate the appearance of impropriety, and I agreed. James stepped forward. I want to be clear, he said, that this relationship does not reflect anything negative about Maya's qualifications or her promotion. I stepped down because it was the right thing to do, and because I genuinely believe that Maya is exactly the leader this company needs right now. She's been transforming this place in ways that I didn't believe were possible, and I'm proud to support her in this role. He looked at Maya. I'm also doing this because I believe that leadership should be authentic. I believe that asking our employees to show up as full human beings while we hide the fact that we're human beings ourselves is hypocritical, so we're not hiding anymore. This relationship will not affect decisions about hiring, promotion, compensation, or any other matters of company policy, Maya said. We're committed to maintaining professional boundaries at work. We're also committed to being honest about the fact that we care about each other. She smiled slightly. I think that's actually a sign of a healthy workplace. I think it's good that people can see that you can care about someone and still maintain professional integrity. So that's what we're modeling for you. The response was mixed. Some people applauded. Some people looked shocked. Some people looked like they were already making mental notes about what this meant for their own careers. But nobody was angry. Nobody was outraged. They were mostly just processing. After the meeting, the company's Slack channel immediately started buzzing with commentary. Some of it was supportive. Finally, some real humanity in this company. Some of it was skeptical. This could go very wrong very fast. Some of it was predictably cynical. Watch Maya start giving him raises now. But what surprised Maya was how much of the response was positive. People were grateful for the transparency. People were actually kind about it. People seemed to understand that they were watching two people try to do something difficult with integrity. By end of business, the stock price was up 2%. The first real test came 2 weeks later. The engineering team proposed a new product architecture that would require a significant investment and 6 months of development time. It was ambitious. It was risky. It had about a 60% chance of working out and opening up entirely new market opportunities. It had a 40% chance of being a spectacular waste of resources. Maya reviewed the proposal carefully. She reviewed it multiple times, looking for flaws, looking for problems, looking for reasons it wouldn't work. And then she brought it to James for feedback. This was where they had to be careful. This was where they had to demonstrate that their romantic relationship didn't interfere with professional judgment. It's a good idea, James said, after reviewing the proposal. It's the kind of bold move that Zenith used to be known for before I became too cautious. The risk profile is reasonable for a company our size. I think you should approve it. But you don't have any reservations? Maya asked carefully. Of course I do, he said. I have all the reservations I always have about new ventures. But reservations aren't the same as objections. This is a calculated risk, and I think the potential upside justifies it. And you're telling me this as someone who knows this company and believes in the product, Maya said, not as someone who's trying to support me because you're in love with me. I'm telling you this as someone who is both of those things, he said, but yes, the product opinion is genuine. It's not influenced by the personal connection. Maya approved the project. She allocated the resources. She set the timeline. And then, for the first time since she had arrived at Zenith, she wondered if she had made the right decision, and whether that doubt was coming from legitimate professional concern or from the fact that she was worried about what it would mean if this project failed when she had approved it. She called Cassidy from her hotel room that night. This is what I was worried about, Maya said. This is exactly the situation that Diane warned me about. I make a decision, and now I'm second-guessing myself because I'm worried that people are going to think I made it for personal reasons. But did you, Cassidy asked, make the decision for personal reasons? No, Maya said. I made it because it's objectively a good investment. But I'll never know for sure if I would have made the same decision if I weren't in love with James. That's true of literally every decision you make involving people you care about, Cassidy said. When you hire someone you like, you're never sure if you hired them because they're the best candidate or because you like them. When you give a raise to someone you care about, you're never sure if they deserved it or if you were being generous. But that's not actually a problem. That's just the reality of being human. It feels like a problem, Maya said. Maybe it's not, Cassidy said. Maybe it's just complexity. Maybe the fact that you're aware of it and thinking about it and trying to be fair about it actually means you're handling it the right way. The crisis came from an unexpected direction. 3 weeks into the new product development, a former employee sued Zenith Industries. Her name was Jennifer, and she had worked in the marketing department 5 years ago. Her lawsuit claimed that she had been subjected to a hostile work environment under James's leadership, that she had complained multiple times to HR, and that the company had failed to address the situation. She was seeking damages for emotional distress and back pay for the time she had spent in therapy after leaving the company. The company lawyer, Patricia Morrison, called an emergency meeting with Maya and James. "This is serious," Patricia said. "She has documentation of the hostile environment. She has emails showing that she complained to HR. We have a record that shows the company was aware of the issue and didn't address it effectively." "How much exposure do we have?" Maya asked. "Potentially significant," Patricia said. "She's asking for $250,000 in damages. We could settle, or we could fight it, but fighting it would require depositions, discovery, and a trial. It would be expensive and public." "What's the right thing to do?" James asked quietly. "Legally," Patricia said. "That depends on what the evidence shows." "Not legally," James said. "Morally." Patricia looked at him for a moment. "Morally," she said, "I think you created an environment that harmed this woman. I think she complained and was not adequately supported. I think settling with her and ensuring that similar situations don't happen in the future is the right thing to do." "Then that's what we do," James said. "We settle. We pay what she's asking for, and we implement additional protections to make sure this doesn't happen again." "That could be seen as an admission of guilt," Patricia warned. "It could open us up to additional lawsuits." "Then we'll deal with those if they come," James said. He looked at Maya. "What do you think?" Maya was very aware that this was a moment where her personal feelings about James could influence her business decision. She was aware that she could rationalize almost anything because she wanted to support him and protect him. So she approached it strategically. "What do you recommend from a pure business perspective?" she asked Patricia, setting aside the moral question. "What's better for the company?" "Settling is generally better in cases like this," Patricia said. "It avoids public trial. It avoids depositions where your leadership practices will be scrutinized on record. It prevents the narrative from becoming company fights with victim. Settlement usually leads to less media attention." "Then that's the business decision," Maya said. "We settle. And separately, we implement new policies. Not because we're trying to cover something up, but because it's the right thing to do. And it also happens to be the right business decision." She looked at James. "But I want you to know," she said, "that I'm making this decision in spite of my personal feelings about you, not because of them. I'm making it because it's right. And I needed to be clear about that." "I know," he said quietly. The settlement was announced the following week. Zenith Industries agreed to settle the lawsuit for $250,000, and they also announced a series of new workplace protections. Mandatory training for all managers about appropriate workplace behavior, an independent HR hotline for confidential complaints, and a formal review process for any complaints that would include oversight from an external consultant. The media coverage was surprisingly positive. Most outlets framed it as company takes accountability for past problems and implements comprehensive change. The fact that James had stepped down was cited as evidence of the company's commitment to cultural transformation. "That went better than I expected," Patricia Morrison said when she called Maya to debrief. "Because we did the right thing," Maya said. "And it turned out that the right thing was also the smart thing." By the end of Chapter 5, it had been 3 months since Maya arrived at Zenith, 3 months since she walked back into that boardroom and saw James's face change when he recognized her. 3 months since she decided to take a risk on someone who had once broken her heart in a completely different way. The company was transformed, employee retention was up, employee engagement was up. The stock price had climbed 15%. New product development was accelerating. The culture had fundamentally shifted from fear-based to possibility-based. And she and James were still together. They had moved in together. A beautiful apartment in the Upper West Side, with big windows and enough space to not feel like they were constantly on top of each other. They had established routines. Breakfast together most mornings, with him making the French press coffee and her reading the news on her phone. Dinner together most nights, usually cooked by her, because he claimed to be unable to boil water without creating some kind of disaster. But they were still figuring it out. There were moments when the power dynamic felt strange, even though he was no longer technically her subordinate. There were moments when she wondered if she had made the right decision, and whether that doubt was legitimate professional concern or just the normal anxiety of someone trying to build something new. One night, about 3 months in, they were sitting on the couch in their apartment with the lights of the city spread out below them. And James said something that shifted everything. "I need to tell you something," he said. "And I need you to know that I've been thinking about this for a while, so this isn't impulsive." Maya turned to look at him. "Okay," she said carefully. "I think you should make this official," he said. "I think you should announce that you're stepping back from day-to-day management at Zenith and that you're going to bring in a new CEO, someone from outside the company, someone who doesn't have the complications that either of us has." "What?" Maya said. "I think you've done what you came here to do," he said. "You've transformed this company. You've changed the culture, you've built the foundation for it to thrive, and I think now you should focus on your company, Sterling Holdings, and let someone else run Zenith." "That's insane," Maya said. "I'm just getting started here. The engineering project I approved is only halfway through. There's so much more to do." "There is," he agreed, "but there's always more to do. And I don't think you came to New York to run someone else's company forever. I think you came here to prove something, and you've proved it. Now I think you should figure out what you actually want." "I want to be with you," she said. "I know," he said. "And I'm saying that you can still do that, but you can also stop proving things. You can also stop being the person who needs to fix things and save things. You can also just be the person who wants things." Maya looked at him for a long moment. "This is very different from what you said 3 months ago when we were in that coffee shop," she said. "I know," he said, "but I meant it then and I mean it now. The difference is that then I was asking you to take a risk on me. Now I'm asking you to take a risk on yourself. I'm asking you to trust that you've already won. You've already proved what you needed to prove. You've already come back and shown me and this company and everyone else what you're capable of. Now I'm asking you to ask yourself what you actually want, separate from what you needed to prove." Wow, what an emotional roller coaster. From outing their relationship to handling the lawsuit to James asking her to step back. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what you think Maya should do. Should she stay at Zenith or step back? Maya didn't answer James immediately. She sat with his question for 3 days. 3 days of thinking about it while she was in meetings, while she was reviewing financials, while she was sitting in her office looking out at the Manhattan skyline and trying to figure out what she actually wanted versus what she felt obligated to want. The truth was complicated, the way truth usually was. She had come to New York 10 years ago with a dream. She had been humiliated. She had left. And then she had built something from nothing, something that was hers, something that proved she didn't need anyone's validation to matter. And then she had come back and acquired Zenith, specifically to prove that she could succeed in the world that had once rejected her. But James was right. She had proved it. She had proved it so thoroughly that everyone could see it. The company was transformed. The culture was different. She had done what she set out to do. So what happened now? She scheduled a meeting with Elizabeth, the board chair, on Wednesday afternoon. They met in Elizabeth's office, which was decorated with art that suggested someone with actual taste and actual opinions about things. "I want to talk about succession planning," Maya said without preamble. I think it's time for me to step back from the CEO role at Zenith. Elizabeth didn't look surprised. I was wondering when you'd come to that conclusion, she said. How long have you been thinking about this? 3 days, Maya said. It hit me that I came here to prove something, and I've proved it. But I'm not actually a lifer at Zenith. This isn't my company, and I think the right move is to bring in someone who actually wants to build a long-term career here. Who would you recommend? Elizabeth asked. There's someone in the organization, Maya said. Marcus Thompson. He's been in senior product development for the last 6 months. He has vision. He has integrity. He actually cares about the people he works with. He would be perfect. Marcus is brilliant, Elizabeth said. But he's also only 38. Some board members might question whether he has enough experience. He has enough integrity, Maya said. And I can teach him everything else he needs to know during a transition period. I can be an advisor for the first year. I can help him navigate the politics, but I think he's the right person. Elizabeth leaned back in her chair. When do you want to make this transition? She asked. Immediately, Maya said, or as soon as we can make it official. I'd like to announce that Marcus is being promoted to CEO and that I'm stepping back into an advisory role. I'd like to make it clear that this is not a demotion or a failure. It's a success. It's the company reaching a point of stability where it doesn't need me to be hands-on anymore. Okay, Elizabeth said. I'll bring it to the board, but I think they'll approve it. You've done remarkable work here, Maya. I hope you know that. The announcement came the following Monday. Maya made a brief statement at the all-hands meeting. Zenith has reached a point of strength and stability that allows me to step back from the day-to-day leadership. I'm incredibly proud of what we've built together in the last 4 months. The culture is transformed. The company is thriving. And I believe that Marcus Thompson, who many of you know from his work in product development, is exactly the leader this company needs going forward. Marcus looked shocked when she said his name. He looked even more shocked when Elizabeth formally announced his promotion. But when Maya met with him privately after the announcement, she saw something in his face that told her this was the right decision. I don't know if I'm ready for this, he said immediately. You are, Maya said. And if you're not, you will be. That's what growing into a role means. But I'll be here. I'm going to stay on as an advisor for the next 6 months. I'll help you with decisions. I'll introduce you to board dynamics. I'll teach you everything I've learned. What about James? Marcus asked. How's he going to handle working under someone new? James will handle it perfectly, Maya said, because he's done the work to actually change who he is. He's not going to sabotage you or undermine you. He's going to support you because it's the right thing to do. And he did. When Marcus asked James to help him understand the company's strategic initiatives, James was patient and thorough. When Marcus questioned decisions that James had made previously, James actually engaged with the criticism instead of becoming defensive. The transformation that had seemed impossible 4 months ago was actually real. 2 weeks after the CEO transition, Maya sat down with James and told him about the offers she had received. 3 venture capital firms have approached me, she said. They want to discuss bringing me on as a partner. They want me to use my skills to identify undervalued companies, acquire them, and transform them the way I did with Zenith. It would be lucrative. It would be interesting. It would keep me in New York. James was quiet. What do you want to do? He asked finally. That's the problem, she said. I don't know. A month ago I would have said yes immediately. I would have seen it as the next logical step in my career. But now I'm not sure. Why not? He asked. Because I'm tired, she said. I'm tired of proving things. I'm tired of transforming companies and fixing broken systems. I'm tired of doing things to prove something to someone else. She looked at him. And I'm wondering if maybe what I actually want is something different, something quieter, something that feels more like my life and less like a project. So what would that look like? He asked. I don't know, she said. I've never really thought about it. He took her hand. "Then maybe it's time to think about it," he said, "because I have a proposal, and I've been waiting for the right moment to make it." He stood up and walked to the window, and Maya felt her heart start beating very quickly. "I know this is fast," he said. "I know we've only been together for 4 months. I know that's not a very long time in the grand scheme of things. But I also know that I love you. I know that the best days of my life have been the days I've spent with you. And I know that I want to spend the rest of my life figuring out who I can be when I'm not trying to prove anything to anyone." He turned around and he had something in his hand, a small box. "I'm asking you to marry me," he said, "not because it's the next logical step in a relationship timeline, but because I actually can't imagine my life without you in it. Because I want to build something with you that isn't about fixing anything or proving anything. I just want to build a life." Maya felt tears starting to form. "You're not doing this to solve a problem," she said. "You're not doing this to make something work or to manage some complication." "No," he said, "I'm doing this because I love you, because I want to marry you, because I think we could be really happy together if we actually let ourselves have that." He opened the box. The ring was simple, a small diamond in a white gold band. It was beautiful because it wasn't trying to be anything other than what it was. "Yes," Maya said, "the answer is yes." He slipped the ring on her finger, and they stood by the window looking out at the city that had once seemed so impossibly vast, and now just seemed like the place where they had found each other. But saying yes to James's proposal didn't automatically resolve the question of what Maya wanted to do with her life. She turned down the venture capital offers. She told the firms that she appreciated the interest, but that she wasn't looking to go back into acquisition and transformation work. She didn't explain why, and they didn't need her to. They probably assumed it had to do with James. They were partly right, though not in the way they probably thought. It wasn't that she was staying in New York because of James. It was that she was staying in New York because she had finally figured out what she actually wanted, separate from what she felt obligated to want. She wanted to build something new. She called a meeting with David and Priya from Sterling Holdings. They met in a coffee shop in Billings, Montana, where the three of them still maintained an office for the company's Western operations. "I want to start a new division," she said. "Something separate from Sterling Holdings, but using some of the same infrastructure. I want to focus on helping companies transform their workplace culture. I want to take everything I learned at Zenith and help other organizations do the same thing." "So, you're starting a consulting firm," Priya said. "Sort of," Maya said. "But more than that. I want to take equity stakes in the companies we work with. I want to have a financial incentive in their success. I want to be invested in their transformation, not just their payment to me." David was already nodding. "That's brilliant," he said. "That's actually genius. You're the perfect person to do this. You have the credibility, you have the experience, you have the track record. And you're going to need a name," Priya said. "What are you going to call it?" Maya smiled. "Rewrite," she said. "I'm going to call it Rewrite, because that's what we're doing. We're rewriting how companies operate. We're rewriting workplace culture. We're giving companies the chance to become second versions of themselves." The wedding took place 6 months later, on a Saturday in June, in a beautiful garden venue in Westchester County. It wasn't large. 125 people, mostly close friends and family, and key people from their professional lives. It was exactly what both of them wanted. Maya wore a white dress that was simple and elegant, nothing that required being someone other than who she was. James wore a dark suit and the same expression he had been wearing for the past 6 months, which was generally just happiness, mixed with the occasional moment of concern that something would go wrong. Nothing went wrong. David from Sterling Holdings gave a toast that made everyone laugh. Elizabeth from the Zenith board gave a toast that was mostly about how she had known from the moment Maya walked into the boardroom that she was exactly the right person to lead the company, and that she was also exactly the person that James needed to meet. And then James's sister Claire gave a toast that made everyone cry. She talked about the brother she had known 10 years ago, the one who was closed off and defended and didn't know how to let people in. She talked about how much he had changed, and she thanked Maya for seeing through the walls and helping him become the person he was capable of being. When it was time for vows, James went first. "I'm not good at words," he said, which made Maya smile because it was absolutely not true. "But I'm going to try. Maya, you came back into my life at exactly the moment when I was finally ready to see how much I had damaged things. You held me accountable. You believed in my capacity to change, and then impossibly you decided to love me anyway. I don't think I'll ever fully understand why you did that, but I'm grateful for it every single day. I promise to keep doing the work to be worthy of that trust. I promise to keep showing up as my most authentic self. And I promise to spend the rest of my life trying to be the person you believed I could be." And then it was Maya's turn. "I came back to New York to prove something," she said. "I came back to show you and myself that I could succeed without needing anyone's validation. And I did prove that. But you know what I learned? I learned that proving things is exhausting. I learned that there's a difference between building something because you have to and building something because you want to. James, you helped me understand that difference. You helped me see that I didn't have to keep fighting, that I could actually have joy in my life, not just accomplishment. I promised to keep building things, but I promised to do it because I want to, not because I need to prove something. And I promise to keep believing in your capacity to grow the way you've believed in mine." They kissed, and everyone applauded, and it felt like a beginning rather than an ending, which is probably how weddings are supposed to feel. 1 year after the wedding, Rewrite had transformed 14 companies across North America. The results were quantifiable and significant. Average employee retention increased by 23% across Rewrite's client base. Average employee satisfaction scores increased by 31%, and average stock price increased by 18%. Maya was building a company that actually changed things, and she was doing it not because she needed to prove something, but because she loved doing it. James was thriving in his role as Chief Innovation Officer at Zenith. Marcus had become a genuinely excellent CEO. The company was more profitable than it had ever been. The culture was genuinely collaborative, and people actually wanted to work there. They bought a house in Tribeca. It had high ceilings and big windows, and a kitchen where James could make his ridiculous French press coffee without feeling like he was taking up too much space. It had a home office where Maya could take calls with clients. It had space for the life they were building together. One evening, a year and a month after they had gotten married, they were sitting on the roof of their building, looking out at the Manhattan skyline, and James said something that made her laugh. "Do you ever think about that meeting?" he asked. "That conference room meeting 10 years ago. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't been cruel to you?" "Sometimes," Maya said. "I think about how I would probably have stayed at Zenith. I would have probably slowly climbed the corporate ladder. I probably would have become a very competent, very unhappy person working in someone else's company." "So you're thanking me for humiliating you?" James asked, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I'm saying that the worst thing that ever happened to me led to the best things that ever happened to me," she said. "I'm saying that sometimes you need someone to show you exactly who you don't want to be in order to figure out who you actually do want to be. And yeah, I wish it hadn't been you, but it was, and it mattered." "I'm sorry, though," he said. "I'm still sorry that I did that. I'm still sorry that I was that version of myself." "I know you are," she said. "That's part of why I can forgive it, because you're not defending it. You're not pretending it was okay. You're actively working to be someone different." She took his hand. "And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that you did the work to change. Because it meant that when I came back, there was actually someone here who was capable of loving me the right way. And that's it. What did you think? Did you love the ending? Were you satisfied with Maya and James's story?" Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and rate this final chapter. What was your favorite moment from the whole series? Like and subscribe for more romantic comedies and stories about second chances and real, messy, beautiful love. Thank you so much for watching.